Good evening from the State of Kuwait. Welcome to the 7 o'clock news for Friday, the 17th of October 2014. I am Dalia Badran with the headlines for tonight. The Ministry of Interior lauds the cooperation of parents who reported that their children joined extremist groups. Fighting continues in the Syrian Kurdish border town of Kobani, which is still besieged by the IS militants. Hong Kong riot police clashes with pro-democracy activists in a district where police cleared protesters earlier in the day. And the presidents of Russia and Ukraine meet with their European leaders to discuss the ceasefire in eastern Ukraine. Hello and welcome. The Ministry of Interior lauded the constructive, fruitful, and positive cooperation by parents who reported that their children were deluded and later joined the extremist groups. The ministry's security media department said in a statement that such cooperation by parents is motivated by their love and loyalty to their country, security and stability. It warned against attempts to deceive young people by false targets and slogans on jihad through suspicious secret media and other means of communication. The ministry referred to security precautions being taken in a serious bid to protect young people from falling prey to terrorist groups and urged citizens to further cooperate with security authorities. With the attendance of the GCC Ministers of Culture, the 20th meeting was held with the aim of discussing joint projects in the field, namely the GCC Cultural Strategy. The cultural activities agenda for 2015-2016 was the key issues for discussions during the meeting. The meeting was held in the context of the ongoing cooperation and coordination among the GCC states. It discussed a host of cultural projects and the issues of interest to the GCC countries. Our correspondent Hiba Abdurrahman was there and has this report.
The 20th meeting of the GCC Ministers of Culture was recently held at the Sheraton Hotel to discuss joint projects in the field, namely the GCC Cultural Strategy. The meeting, which was sponsored by Minister of Information, Minister of State for Youth Affairs, and the National Council for Culture, Arts and Letters Chairman, Sheikh Salman Subah Salim Mahmoud al-Subah, addressed common projects and issues outlined in the common strategy approved during the 29th summit hosted by Oman in 2008. The ministers discussed means of implementing programs within this strategy and pursuing inter-GCC cooperation for bolstering the distinctive Gulf identity, preserving the Arabic language and the Islamic cultural heritage. GCC Cultural Undersecretaries also held a preparatory meeting on the eve of the ministerial gathering to discuss the agenda that included several issues such as GCC cultural cooperation with international entities such as ASEAN and the EU. Moreover, means of implementing programs within this strategy and pursuing inter-GCC cooperation for bolstering the distinctive Gulf identity and preserving the Arabic language were discussed during the meeting. The meeting acquires special importance amid regional developments that prompt more coordination and cooperation among the member states. The Arabian Gulf identity needs to be sustained through deep-seating the concept of nationalism. The 20th meeting of the GCC Ministers of Culture came after a series of preparatory meetings for the undersecretaries to set and finalize the agenda of this meeting. From Sheraton Hotel, this is Hiba Abdurrahman reporting for English News.
Thank you, Heba. The State of Kuwait is taking part in efforts along with other nations aimed at reaching a global consensus on UN masterminded post-2015 development agenda. This came in Kuwait's speech delivered by the third secretary of the permanent Kuwaiti mission to the UN, Abdullah Ahmed al-Sharrah, before the Economic Committee's meeting held as part of the 69th session of the UN General Assembly. Al-Sharrah said Kuwait is keen on implementing all plans envisaged within a new development framework that would serve the post-2015 plan, indicating that such an approach is essentially designed to create a new global partnership to bolster cooperation between the UN and other parties involved in development, namely the private sector, civil associations, educational institutions, and charities. The Kuwaiti diplomat was referring to a UN masterminded process that aims to help define the future global development framework that will succeed the UN Millennium Development Goals, which comes to an end in 2015. Fighting continued today in the Syrian Kurdish border town of Kobani, besieged by militants from the Islamic State group. US-led airstrikes have been targeting the area for 2 weeks. The airstrikes appear to have had some effect to hold the group's onslaught on the town, which has been under assault since mid-September. Capturing Kobani would give the group a direct link between its positions in the Syrian province of Aleppo and its stronghold of Raqqa to the east. Elsewhere, Iraqi forces launched an attack on the IS militants near Tikrit. The city was among the areas in Syria and Iraq seized by the IS this year. The Lebanese army today arrested at least 42 Syrians hours after a soldier was killed and several others were wounded when a military bus carrying troops in the north came under fire. The Lebanese army confirmed the assault on the bus, saying the military cordoned off the area where the attack took place. In other developments, the military said 2 patrol units came under fire by an unidentified gunman who also tossed a hand grenade at one of its centers in Tripoli. A security source said another Lebanese soldier was wounded when an army patrol in Tripoli came under fire. Israel continues to violate the ceasefire agreement signed in late August by attacking fishermen and other Palestinian workers, leading to a worsening economic situation. Majd al-Wahidi has this report from Gaza.
Israeli naval forces on Thursday evening opened fire at a Palestinian fishing boat off the coast of the Gaza Strip. Witnesses say that one fisherman lost consciousness after the incident, adding that his boat was sunk in the attack, causing huge financial losses. But this is not the first time of attacking fishermen. Since the signing of a ceasefire agreement between Israeli forces and Palestinian fighters in Gaza on August 26th, the Israeli Navy has fired at Gaza fishermen in multiple instances under the pretext that they had surpassed fishing zone limits.
After the truce, the Israeli army is still conducting their violation against the fishermen. They are shooting them, arresting some of them. If they are overcome the area identified by the Israeli Navy.
Israeli authorities also prevented exporting Gaza products this week to the West Bank via the Kerem Shalom crossing. Such violations are deteriorating the economic situations. Economic experts say Gaza's economy has been suffering for years under Israel's land, sea, and air blockade. But the recent conflict between Israel and Gaza has made it even worse, as hundreds of factories, fishing boats, and workplaces were destroyed.
We are talking about 2 months of a stopping in the economic activity. After the 2 months, there were a lot of places, workplaces, factories, workshops, and other workplaces destroyed, which led the Palestinian employees to lose their jobs, and this made unemployment rate rise, and we have seen a lot of economic activity stopped after the war due to the destruction that faced the Palestinian economy.
The World Bank said in a report that the war in Gaza will contribute to a reversal of 7 years of growth in the Palestinian economy, now expected to shrink by nearly 4% this year, and could rebound in 2015 if Gaza reconstruction begins. But with Israel's continuous violations and a crippling blockade, the chances of developing a stable Palestinian economy seem far remote than ever. While Israel continues to impose strict restrictions on Palestinians in Jerusalem and expand settlements in the West Bank, here in Gaza, they impose a blockade, which is not only deteriorating the economic situation, but all aspects of life. Majlou Hadi, Kuwait TV, Gaza.
Thank you, Majd. Forces loyal to Khalifa Haftar, a former Libyan general, continued a bid to reclaim Libya's second city, Benghazi, from militants. At least 14 people were killed today when fighting erupted between armed youth and militias in Benghazi. 7 people were wounded in the port city, where pro-government forces supported by youth are battling the militants. Earlier, Libya's Red Crescent called for a ceasefire in Benghazi to allow the evacuation of families trapped by street fighting. Banks, government offices, supermarkets, and some hospitals were closed in the city on the 3rd day of the clashes. New scuffles broke out today between Hong Kong riot police and pro-democracy activists in a district where police cleared protesters earlier in the day. Police used pepper sprays and batons to fend off a large crowd of people who had gathered in Mong Kok. The chaotic scenes unfolded hours after police moved in to clear tents and barricades at the small protest zone across Victoria Harbour from the main occupied area in the heart of the financial district. This came hours after Hong Kong chief executive sought to defuse the standoff with student-led democracy protesters by reviving an offer of talks over democratic reforms in the city. However, he warned that police would not refrain from clearing protest sites while holding talks. Leaders and officials attended the closing session of the 10th Asia-Europe meeting, ASEM Summit today. European Commission President Herman Van Rompuy and the Mongolian president spoke to dignitaries at the session. Mongolia will host the 11th ASEM Summit in 2016. The ASEM Summit opened yesterday against the backdrop of the conflict in Ukraine, student protests in Hong Kong, and escalating scenes about the Ebola outbreak. The biannual gathering was launched in 1996. Russian President Vladimir Putin met with Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko and other European leaders in Milan today to discuss a ceasefire in eastern Ukraine and resolve the dispute over natural gas supplies. The talks took place on the sidelines of the ASEM summit. Italian Prime Minister hosted the talks held away from the summit venue, which was attended by the German Chancellor, French President, and the British Prime Minister. The West imposed sanctions on Russia for its annexation of Crimea earlier this year and its support of the pro-Russian separatists fighting in the east of Ukraine. Although Putin announced this week that Russian troops near the border with Ukraine would be pulled back, Western officials want to see clear evidence that Moscow is acting on this. Rations of food were distributed by the United Nations World Food Programme, the WFP, to residents in the Liberian capital, Monrovia. The WFP is trying to provide food to around 1.3 million people in the three worst affected countries. By September 14th, it had distributed 3,300 tons of food to more than 180,000 people in Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea. Meanwhile, a major medical charity said international pledges of deployments and aid for Africa's Ebola-hit regions have not yet had any impact on the epidemic. Christopher Stokes of Médecins Sans Frontières said that disease was still out of control. The disease has killed about 4,500 people so far, mostly in West Africa. Rescuers widened their search today for tourists stranded since a series of blizzards and avalanches battered the Himalayas in northern Nepal early this week, leaving at least 29 foreigners and locals dead. Dozens of people were rescued today, but dozens more were still scattered along popular high-altitude hiking trails. The government has formed a high-level committee to coordinate rescue efforts following criticism that officials were not doing enough to help the hikers. Search teams in Nepal rescued 40 people from a high point on the Himalaya route. Officials said the death toll is likely to rise further, with many bodies still to be recovered from the snow. As part of the government's plan to develop and enhance the media sector in the country, a new radio broadcasting building at South Sabaya North neighborhood was inaugurated. The station has the state-of-the-art technology in radio broadcasting. This new building is considered an important step in developing media sector in the country. At the same time, and according to officials in the Ministry of Information, a new broadcasting center would be opened in Al Sabaya area shortly. Heba Abdurrahman was there and has this report.
Minister of Information and Minister of State for Youth Affairs, Sheikh Salman Subah Salam Mahmoud Subah, inaugurated a new radio broadcasting building at South Sabahiyya in neighborhood 32 kilometers south of Kuwait City. The project, which costs 1.15 million Kuwaiti dinar, is a big step forward. It has the state-of-the-art technology in radio broadcasting. The building of the new transmission building is part of the Minister's plan to develop and overhaul all sectors with a view to enhance the role of media in serving the society. In this regard, the Minister said that another broadcasting center would be opened in Subaya neighborhood next week. A main control center would be also inaugurated in November, as these projects would give a significant impetus to the national media potential. The government offers an unlimited support to national media's capacity building and upgrading efforts and plans. The minister unveiled that the government is putting the final touches on a new legislation to regulate electronic media. The law, which will be referred to the National Assembly shortly, focuses on the electronic media outlets of professional press and TV organizations and companies. However, the posts on social networking sites are not addressed by this law. The minister expressed hopes that a set of ethical criteria would be adopted to avoid the misuse of social media by some people, adding that media is assuming responsibilities towards protection of societies, particularly youth, from the destructive ideologies, extremism, and suspicious groups, which threatens the national, Gulf, and Arab security and stability. From Al Sabahiyya area, this is Heba Abdurrahman reporting for English News.
For a chance to see our reports again, please visit our YouTube channel at MOI Kuwait News. Before we end, here is a quick reminder of today's headlines. The Ministry of Interior lauds the cooperation of parents who reported that their children joined the extremist groups. Fighting continues in the Syrian-Kurdish border town of Kobani, which is still besieged by the IS militants. Hong Kong riot police clash with pro-democracy activists in a district where police cleared protesters earlier in the day. The presidents of Russia and Ukraine meet with other European leaders to discuss the ceasefire in eastern Ukraine.